Chapter 641, More Fun in the Game. In this prosperous city, people from different places thronged on the streets. One could always hear news about the neighboring nations while being here. What's happening? Seeing the godly palace knights all over the streets, one mercenary complained. Didn't you hear that the Judgment Godly Palace is searching and arresting assassins all over the world? Another mercenary whispered, I wonder what the assassins did to them. Obviously, the assassins enraged the people of the Godly Palace. I heard that they were humiliated by an assassin in the elf clan. I wonder if that's true. The mercenaries talked among themselves in low voices. It might be true. Another person surmised, it's no wonder that they are making a big deal of it. I remember the Dylan Workshop once boasting about bringing their new mystical realm into the elf clan, but they no longer talk about it anymore. Obviously, these mercenaries were not stupid and could figure out the rough edges of the whole situation from some clues. But I think this is about it. They don't dare do anything outrageous here. A mercenary wearing dark brown leather armor glanced around and said, Our Morning Light Empire is a free nation that allows people to believe anything they want, which is why we don't see anything outrageous here. You can go and have a look in the neighboring nation. It's a nation that believes in the God of Judgment, and the whole nation is helping them capture the assassins. There's no hiding place for assassins in that nation. I heard that they had captured many assassins and planned to execute them together. More, I heard that those assassins captured during the assassination attempt of Luther in Grey Eagle City will be executed too. At this moment, a few figures passed them, and they suddenly stopped. Harrison clenched his fists, and his shoulder shivered slightly. Calm down. They want to lure us over. Another assassin tightly grabbed onto him. I know. Harrison roared hoarsely, but they are our peers. Our brothers and sisters. Does the Brotherhood know about it? They should fight for freedom instead of being hung on the Godly Palace's scaffold. The low-profiled, middle-aged assassin who had grown up in a slum lost his usual composure. We should let more peers know about free will and the master assassins. I think they will like this place as we do. Harrison said, we'll move in stealth and perform the leap of faith together. It doesn't matter even if we're discovered. During our free time, we can drink cappuccino and talk about the stories in Assassin's Creed. He described his ideal life in a mild voice. Then, this middle-aged man's voice broke into a sob. I want them to know that we're not lowly and filthy mice. I want them to know that being an assassin is a great profession. Do you know? I have plans for them. They shouldn't be hung on the damn scaffold. How come this shop is closed? While they talked, the mercenaries passed a shop selling alchemy items and found that it had been shut down. Isn't this the Merlin Workshop's alchemy item shop? How come it's closed? Obviously, this mercenary used to buy alchemy items from this shop. What happened? I wonder how the people in this shop had dealings with assassins. At this moment, another group of people passed the shop, pointing at it while they talked. I have no idea. But I heard that one assassin used a sword made by the Merlin Alchemy Workshop in an assassination attempt on some priests and even broke a priest's protective godly spell with this sword. The Rebel's Blade? The Rebel's Blade had once appeared in a rebellion in the Radiant Light Godly Nation. And this blade full of curses had once broken the godly spell barrier set up in the anti-major ray. It seems similar, but it obviously isn't as powerful as that legendary sword, another person said. But I heard that the owner of the shop hasn't been captured yet, so he probably escaped to another nation, which is why all the shops have been closed. It's a good shop though. Alas, let's move on. Sir, is the trailer out today? Sir, it's still not released today. Almost every day. The elves came into the shop eagerly in anticipation. So did the mercenaries who lived in the city and the Knights of Golden Griffin Knight Legion. Obviously, today's trailer was more informative. In fact, Fang-Chi was watching it too. Since this trailer wasn't introducing the game's background, Fang-Chi knew those things too well. This trailer showed how to play the game and operate in the game. Obviously, the new version of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 not only increased the degree of freedom and openness but added extra content and details. For example, in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1, Li Xiaoyao was the only main character, and players could only choose him to play the game. In The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, there were two main characters, which were Jingtan and Xuanhuan. The story was told from their respective perspectives in alternation. However, when the players played as Jingtan, they didn't know what Xuanhuan was doing and couldn't choose to play Xuanhuan either. The same happened when they played Xuanhuan. The system remake of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 was different. In the trailer, everyone watched Rongzhang practicing sword techniques in the Xuanhuan faction and saw some scenes about his daily interaction with his nephew disciples. Those scenes happened before he met Yuntan. The players could unlock the storyline of Rongzhang and play the game from his perspective after playing as Yuntan to a certain level. Besides, the trailer demonstrated how to play as Liu Menglai and Han Lingshaw, whom could only be played by female players. Different from the original game in which the players could only choose one of the 4 characters to play, the trailer showed that in the new version, 4 players could enter multiplayer mode and control Yuntan, Rongzhang, Liu Menglai, and Han Lingshaw respectively. However, in this mode, the players had to trigger different plots and interactions. In single-player mode, most of the events were triggered automatically and were as real as possible. Of course, if the 4 players controlled the 4 characters to go anywhere and do whatever they wanted, the plot of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 couldn't continue properly, which was why the system had improved the game mode while giving players a greater degree of freedom. It was a blessing to the players who liked to play the games together with their friends. Chapter 642, You will miss an opportunity to become rich. In the game, players could have flying sword races and matches between the disciples of the Xuanhuan faction, and many other things were added. On the other hand, the system version recreated all the details in the forging and spirit injection of weapons. In other words, unlike Diablo 2, the players didn't have to spend lots of time to find the details and materials about the production of items and only start researching it after getting everything that they needed. Also, unlike Dungeon Fighter Online, they didn't have to toss their items into a machine and leave their fate to chance. This time, they could experience and control the whole process of making items. This was an artifact-making skill for cultivators, and it wouldn't be available to players until Rongzhang joined the team. After all, only Rongzhang knew this skill among the 4 teammates. In the castle sitting in the highest position of the city, a middle-aged man dressed in an elegant aristocratic tuxedo was silently sitting behind a desk. His black tuxedo was exquisitely tailored, and his square face was wrinkled. However, his grey moustache gave him a genial and graceful look. At this moment, a figure had just left in a huff, slamming the door behind him. Indifferent, the man stood up and tended to the potted plants on the windowsill as if these flowers and plants were the center of his world. These were not precious flowers but looked like the wild pale yellow flowers that were blooming everywhere in the city. Of course, it might be that these flowers were seen everywhere since they were his favorite. Then, a woman wearing knight armor and with her blonde hair pulled up in a pigtail walked in. "Oh, I don't remember that a junior knight can enter the city administrator's office at will," the middle-aged man said without turning his head. "I also don't remember those promises that a man said to mother before he forgot them the next second." Helen didn't look a bit meek. The middle-aged man's calm expression turned stiff before he said in a deep voice, "You should call me father." Helen turned her head sideways, and stubbornness appeared on her pretty face. After a long pause, the middle-aged man seemed to give in first. He said mildly, "The messenger of the Judgment Godly Palace came to me a moment ago." What did he want? Seeming concerned, Helen turned her head back and asked the question. "Shut down," the middle-aged man said. "He asked me to shut down the shop with official force." Seeing Helen's intense gaze on him, he shook his head and said, "I refused." Seeming to sense her displeasure, he continued, "I didn't do it to help you. After all, our Morning Light Empire is a nation of free faith, and it's not right to allow the Judgment Godly Place to dominate others. This is not the Radiant Light Godly Nation, and they can't do whatever they want in this place. It's your decision, don't expect gratitude from me." Helen opened the door and walked out. When one of her feet was outside the door, she added, "That damn shop owner seems powerful. I don't think he needs anyone's help." "Okay." Looking at Helen, who was walking away, the middle-aged man shook his head and chuckled. Damn it. He just married into power. He's just a stupid lowly ant. What is he without the Hymia family? What right does he have to refuse me? A vicious roar sounded in the godly palace. It came from Glass. "We have other plans." At this moment, the red-robed senior priest walked over. "Anyway, we must deal with the assassins first. Without assassins, that shop's assassin mystical realm will have no reason to exist. Believe me, that shop owner is only an ignorant alchemist seeking his death. Anything is void before the force given by the Almighty God. He will end up like the alchemist named Merlin from the Stan Kingdom." At the mentioning those lofty existences, he sounded extremely reverent. Glass asked, "When will the assassins be executed?" 2 to 3 weeks later. "So long?" Glass asked in surprise. "Be patient," the red-robed senior priest said. "We set up a great trap for them under the direction of Street Dylan. We'll give the assassins more time to come and rescue the prisoners. Of course, this way, we'll capture all these damn assassins." Glass sneered. "They probably don't know. We must reserve many things and not show them to the public. For example, they didn't put every anti-assassination skill in their newly released mystical realm." The red-robed senior priest said in a chilly voice, "If they think that those skills are all that we have, then they must pray to their great predecessor Altair to protect them in hell." Ha ha ha. "Of course, we'll have a real battle instead of a practice." Laughter sounded in the palace. Mr. Fang got up quite early this morning. It could be that the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 would be finally released today, or it could just be that it was a day with nice weather. Anyway, Mr. Fang walked downstairs before the opening time. Used to Mr. Fang's punctuality since he always opened the shop on time, no customers came to the shop at this hour. It was quiet in the shop. After opening the door, Mr. Fang sat down on a couch with his breakfast, a bowl of instant noodles and a sausage. At this moment, a handsome young man who looked to be in his 20s stopped at the door. He was wearing a white mage robe with blue edges and a pointy mage hat. Travel fatigued. He paused for a while outside the door before walking in. At first glance, this man looked very young, but his eyes appeared as deep as the starry night sky. Also, he moved with a maturity and confidence that didn't belong to a young man. "Sir, you run Cultivation Mystical Realms?" He looked around the shop in surprise. Waiting for the instant noodles to be ready, Mr. Fang drank a mouthful of Sprite and nodded casually. "Your shop has little business." This young man smiled as if he was trying to decide on what to say. After a while, he continued, "I think you need some help, maybe some guidance to success." "A guidance to success?" Mr. Fang looked at him in surprise. "Yes." The young mage, who appeared to be in his 20s, said, "I think you're in luck, young man. With my help, your shop will be popular very soon." While being stunned, Fang Chi carefully studied the customer before him. While he was in a daze, the young man took out a magic staff from his inner pocket as if he intended to add to his credibility and demonstrate something to convince Fang Chi. He looked around and outside the door. After making sure that no one else was watching, he took out a stone and waved his magic staff, saying, "Do you see this stone? I'll transform it into a magic crystal." After pausing for a while, Mr. Fang seemed to finally understand, and he said, "I got it." Of course I am." While saying that, he thought, "Now you know that I'm a great alchemist." "You're a scammer, right?" Mr. Fang said. "Puh." This young man almost dropped to the ground. "What? I'm Merlin, a lofty level 9 mage. And you, a young shop owner, dare to call me a scammer? Do I look like a scammer? You will miss an opportunity to become rich." Chapter 643, Major streamers began to broadcast The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4. Mr. Fang stood up and pulled the man to the door. While pushing 2 magic crystals into this man's hand, Fang Chi waved his hand and said, Go and find another shop. Mr. Fang looked frustrated at this moment. It was early morning, and a scammer insisted to show him how to transform a rock into a magic crystal. If he can do that, then I can transform a rock into a piece of gold. Damn it. I pushed 2 magic crystals into his hand. Now he can go and perform in another shop. Clank. With 2 low-level magic crystals in his hand, the Supreme Level 9 Mage and Master Alchemist found that the door closed in his face before he could understand the situation. This situation is strange. Seeing a Grand Alchemist who can turn rocks into magic crystals, the owner of this small shop with little business was not even a little tempted. With his great skills in alchemy and magic spells, he was welcomed in every nation as an VIP. He could make a pile of low-level cultivation mystical realms that were operated by a small shop like this one. Merlin stood at the door with a dark expression. Forget it. He had planned to help this shop grow popular, and he was sure that it would be full within 3 months and be known all over Kanglan City in 1 year. With my alchemy and magic spell knowledge, this little shop owner will be terrified. During the process, he would have a hiding place for himself. But this shop owner just refused such a great opportunity. A gold mine. Do you know what you've missed? A big opportunity to get rich quickly. Even he felt anxious and pitiful for the shop owner. Just when he was about to leave, something flashed in his peripheral. He turned around and saw a big group of knights dressed in luxurious armor and riding on precious mounts while moving toward him slowly. So many knights. Looking at the golden griffin badges on their chests, he knew that they were high-level knights. Was my identity exposed? Number. This nation protects people's freedom of religious beliefs. When did the Judgment Godly Palace obtain such great influence in this place? While he was hesitating if he should make a move, the knights made a turn and passed him. Then, they all stopped and dismounted from their precious mounts. All these knights swarmed into the shop behind him. Sir, is the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 released today? Sir, you promised that the new mystical realm would be released today. Is it released or not? While Merlin gaped at the knights and wondered what was going on, a big group of elves hurried toward the shop. Elder Sewell was determined to play the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 today. She had waited so long. They wouldn't return to the Sylvan Moon Forest until they played it. In a daze, Merlin turned his head and looked at them. When did a human city have so many elves? There is even an elf elder among them. While he was wondering about the situation, a large group of mercenaries and mages swarmed over as well. My goodness. He felt incredulous. They seemed to be talking about a mystical realm. What? The mystical realm in this shop is so popular? This great alchemist who was also a mage was at a loss for words. Do you guys know what a truly great mystical realm looks like? You all swarmed into this small shop and left me, a lofty existence and a great alchemist master, outside. Suddenly, a thought dawned on him. Is this shop owner so sure of his own alchemy skills that my skills are beneath his level, and he doesn't want to bother with me? If the shop owner were just an ignorant ordinary person, he would just laugh it off. But now, he found that the situation was too outrageous to be ignored. He strode back into the shop and shouted, "Sir, let me try that mystical realm too." After waiting in line for a while, Merlin finally got to activate the mystical realm named the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4. Is this cultivation mystical realm any different from all the others that I have played? Doubting its quality, he found a seat and entered the game. At this moment, the players in the old shops had eagerly entered the game. In the new shop, the most popular game was still Assassin's Creed, and almost every customer played it. Even though the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 was released today, many people continued playing Assassin's Creed while they waited to see the effects of the new game. But in the old shops, the situation was different. The Assassin's Creed series was indeed good and had many fans, but the Legend of the Sword and Fairy series was among the hottest games. Its huge group of fans instantly ignited the atmosphere in the shops. Some players couldn't come to the shops every day due to their busy schedules. After all, the shops were here and wouldn't move away. But today, even the ancient family masters in the spiritual state put aside their daily business and came to the shop. After all, The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 was released today, and they must show their support. By now, the old shops had been divided into many zones with space folding technology, but they were still crammed with customers today. The Geocity shop was even busier. Many civilian players who didn't have membership cards almost broke the counter. Calm down, everyone. While waving his folding fan, Xuanhuan sweated profusely as he said, I promise you that everyone can play The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 today. Those who are waiting can go to the lounge area to take a break and watch the live streams, which will help you play the game better when it's your turn, right? In a while, the big streamers will play the game in their live stream rooms. Right now, the Geocity shop was being managed by two senior clerks. Xuanhuan and Yuziwai also yelled, anyone who doesn't have a seat can go and watch the live streams first. Our popular streamer, New Snow, will give us a live stream. I wonder what amazing plays New Snow will show us today. Everyone, please go and support her. I heard that the big streamers of Dungeon Fighter Online such as Rose and Rain and Zhu Yangxiao will stream The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 too. Xuanhuan said, I'm sure that their live streams will be excellent. Don't miss these shows. By the way, our sister Sudanji, will put the whole process on the live stream too. So many people doing live streams. Really? Rose and Rain hasn't done live streams for a long time, right? I want to watch New Snow's live stream. Let's go and watch Elder Sue's live stream. Maybe we can see her land on her face when using the leap of faith again. Sitting near the counter, Sutanji put down her virtual reality headset and looked back. She seemed to hear some strange words about her. Seeing that there were no seats available, many people went to watch the live stream. Of course, some people just watched while standing behind the computers. For example, Sutanji and Nalan Minksu now each had a large group of people standing behind them. Chapter 644, Elder Su is being mocked again. In the past, Mr. Fang had to try the game first to show everyone. Otherwise the customers wouldn't know how to play. Now that the shop had released trailers showing the background of the game and the proper controls, Mr. Fang had much less work to do when the game was formally released. By now, many players had clicked on the logo on the desktop and entered The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4. The melodious flute tune together with the faint air notes felt like light floating clouds, and they brought the players to an ancient-looking square mirror. The mist and cloud in the mirror seemed to draw them into a dreamlike fantasy world. My goodness. Upon entering the game, Merlin had the feeling that this was a grand production. While scratching his head, he wondered, when did the cultivation mystic realms of this city advance to this high of a level? If a small workshop in this city can reach this high of a level, then I, a level 9 alchemist, probably can only be a little clerk in such a shop to survive. How can it be? Astonished, he began the new game. The elves and members of the Night Legion had also entered the game. However, the assassins including Elena and Harrison didn't have time to play this game yet since they put all their time on practicing the assassination skills in Assassin's Creed. However, they were still curious about this new game. Right now, they stood behind the elves and watched them play with bowls of instant noodles in their hands. Oh, is this the Immortal Realm? Commander Elvin had just clicked on New Beginning when he was driven into the ancient mirror by a powerful force. The mirror fluttered like the surface of a lake, and he found that he was inside the world in the ancient mirror. The music is so good. The art-loving elves found the melodious flute tune and the low and sad notes harmonious and beautiful like flowing water and breezes in nature, even though they didn't know the names of the instruments. Are they the musical instruments from the East continent? One of them sounds like a fiddle flute. Obviously, Elder Sewell was a music lover. She could play beautiful music with a leaf from the Sylvan Moon Forest. I wonder what instrument this is. I want to try it. Everything looks so real. While flying through the ocean of clouds into the immortal world behind the white clouds, Merlin was stunned to his core. As a supreme level mage, he had experienced all the things in the world that most people could never experience. However, He had never heard about any other cultivation mystic realm that could be this real. As a master alchemist, he knew how difficult it was to achieve this level of realness. Perhaps the East continent had achieved a great breakthrough only in this one area. He thought as he continued the game. Grand and beautiful buildings and palaces stood in the immortal mountains. When the players looked down, they saw many disciples wearing blue and white Taoist robes and standing on a platform that was surrounded by faint mist and guarded by auspicious beasts. From the distance, the disciples looked like troops that were in compact formations. A huge lotus-shaped platform made of green and white jade hovered in the sky. Two ethereal voices came from the platform while two immortal swords, Xuanhuan and Xi, emitted bright immortal light with spiritual essence flowing inside. The two immortal swords were engulfed by orange-red flame-like light and icy blue frost-like light respectively. This is the scene shown in the trailer. Seeing this familiar scene, the elves almost leapt up in excitement. I see this too. Sitting across from them, Mercenary Greet yelled in elation as well. The two swords came together, and a tremendous streak of spiritual essence traveled through the center of the cloud platform into the array pattern in the center of the stone platform surrounded by lotus flowers. Immediately, two dazzling sword beams shot up into the sky. The whole sky seemed to be pierced open, revealing a magical, dreamlike world. Are they mages of the East continent? Obviously, there were many things that the players didn't understand. However, this gave them a sense of mystery and didn't hinder the gaming experience. Subconsciously, they yelled in excitement, "Oh, Elf God Almighty!" Elder Sewell was also stunned by this scene. What am I looking at? Don't be afraid. It's just a mystic realm. A fantasy world for us to watch. A few golden griffin knights who were less sensitive hurried to explain. At this moment, Xiao started his live stream in the old shop. While recovering from his shock, he stroked his short hair and said, "As you can see, this game is really awesome. Considering the high quality of the two previous games of this series, I suggest you guys try it if you're still hesitating." At this moment, Nalan Mingsu was obviously calmer than the others in her live stream. That's why I call the Legend of Sword and Fairy series the most anticipated work. They are exciting at the very beginning. I have to take a break and eat some potato chips to calm down. Then, she stuffed some potato chips into her mouth. Gonged Xiao. At this moment, Mu Donglai was sitting on a couch, not able to find a seat since he was late. I heard that you're very familiar with these live streams. Can you recommend one to me? Of course. Obviously, Xiao Yelf was well informed in this area. According to my observation of their daily live streams, I divide them into several big categories. If you want to watch excellent details, granular control, and ultimate plays, you can watch the live streams hosted by Rose and Rain, Lord Nalan, Almighty Demonic God, and Miss Sprite. As everyone know, Almighty Demonic God is also called Almighty Smirking Face Emoji, and Rose and Rain usually works together with a dark-faced man in her live streams. However, they are all ultimate professionals and have great technical foundation. It is not useful to low-level players since ordinary people can't copy their plays, Xiao Yelf said with great knowledge. So, I usually watch Xiao and New Snow's live streams since those players are easy to copy. Xiaoyu has a very cute style and good skills. You can watch her live stream if you like, but she doesn't live stream often. The live stream of hardworking Fairy Liu is quite interesting too. These are streamers who I watch quite often, Xiao Yelf said. Besides, there are streamers such as the King of Rangers and Mad Butcher. They have good skills, but I don't watch them often. Mu Donglai said curiously, how come you didn't mention Elder Su? Gonged Xiao. She's a idle-style streamer, Xiao Yelf whispered. Don't tell anyone I said that. Mu Donglai's face twitched as he thought, is it really proper to mock Elder Su this way? Chapter 645, Qizhao materialized in Rock Creek Cave. At this moment, many huge demon beasts flew down from the world that appeared in the sky. In legend, Tapirs were rare beasts that swallowed dreams. The dream tapirs from the fantasy netherworld was obviously fiercer and more elegant than those in legends, with lean and long bodies, fox-like heads, long tails, rainbow-colored feathers, and mountain-like size. They landed among the disciples of the Xuanhuan faction, causing a bloody catastrophe. Paws slashed out with blood spraying in all directions, and swords whistled, mixing with the roars of wild beasts. The ethereal figures on the mountain top among the clouds moved, and the sharp sword beams and chilly and alluring demonic spells formed a grand battle between immortals and demons. The elves and mercenaries gaped at the scene with shock and awe on their faces. The knights, who were used to seeing many similar battles, found that even a story in the game could be so grand and majestic. Although they didn't understand it yet, the players felt awestruck. That's all? While they were enjoying it, the scene suddenly dimmed before them. That's the end. Who won the battle anyway? They had seen the moment when Xuanhuan faked defeat and then sneak attacked the King's spiritual master. TL note: King's spiritual master is also known as the Grand Pure One. What's happening? Damn it. The scum shop owner did it again. We are left hanging again. Mr. Fang told them that it wasn't his fault, and he thought, the game is created soft star. Why are you blaming it on me? He looked sulky. After the opening cinematics, the game started. Oh, this person who looks to be a faction chief was killed by the demon. In her live stream room, Xuanhuan finished watching the cinematics while eating potato chips. She explained the scenes while watching it, looking quite professional. Then, a crude wooden house appeared in everyone's eyes. Xuanhuan King's memorial tablet was placed on the table in the house, and smoke floated from the sandalwood incense sticks. Beside the table was a small boar that had been tied up for sacrifice. How come this person looks like a savage? On the screen was a good-looking young man with messy hair, with animal fur draped on his shoulders. The young man was wearing crude cotton clothes, and he kneeled before the memorial tablet with a dull expression. Dad, I know I'm in the wrong. Last night, the boar's loud screams kept me up for most of the night, which is why I'm late for burning the incense sticks for you this morning. Spring passed already, so I don't know why it's screaming so much. The small boar that was tied on the side honked. Dad told me to burn 3 incense sticks for him in the morning and night. It seemed like he was talking to the boar. You don't know how terrifying he looked when he got angry. Is he the main character? Xuanhuan ate another potato chip and said, how come he looks so dull? After all, the main characters in the Legend of Sword and Fairy 1 and 3 are all clever, but this guy. Xuanhuan touched her head and thought, how come he looks as dull as a cattle? Meanwhile, in the new shop Mage Merlin was also puzzled. How come this mystical realm is different from all the others that I had seen? The elves, knights, and mercenaries had also come to this part. Then, they heard low roars of a boar outside the door. Obviously, the young man drew out the big boar after catching the small one. Great. I captured a boar, and another came for free. Pleased, Xuanhuan ran out the door. Now, it was time for the players to control the main character. Can we use both the bow and sword? Seeing Xuanhuan taking out his bow, the elves who were archery masters were eager to try. In the room, there was also a rusty thin sword. It looked old and wasn't well maintained. Can we use these 2 weapons? Elena and the other assassins who were watching from behind looked eager. After all, bows and swords were common weapons used in Assassin's Creed. I wonder how it feels to use these weapons. I saw this scene in the trailer. The player's spawn place was on Greenbird Peak, which was covered by giant ancient trees that looked like screens. Behind the wooden house was a huge waterfall with a stone bridge connecting the banks of the river beneath the waterfall. Before the house was an ancient path made of green stones. Further away, there was a tall cliff. Looking over, there was the misty and beautiful scenery. All the grass and trees in this place looked natural. For the elves, this place had a type of beauty different from the kind that they were used to seeing. Oh, I thought Moonlight Lake in Sylvan Moon Forest was the most beautiful place that I've seen. Salah's pretty eyes looked at the picturesque green bird peak in pleasant surprise. So beautiful. For elves who loved art and nature, they would never miss such an opportunity to enjoy the rare natural beauty of this place. As for the task and plot, they would think about them later. Yes, there were the legendary fans of beautiful scenery. They must enjoyed the natural beauty first. The female boar had run into the Rock Creek cave in which Yuntan's father's tomb was located, but these elves ignored it and just ran around Green Bird Peak, wishing to take screenshots of each place they went. As for the Golden Griffin Knights and Mage Merlin, they liked the scenery as well, but they weren't as crazy over it as the elves. Is this just a low-level mystical realm used to practice skills? Merlin was puzzled. According to the previous grand battle they had just watched, this mystical realm should be a high-level one. How come the strange savage that I'm controlling only has a little bit of strength in his body? Were those prior images just a bluff? Helen had come to this part too. In her eyes, the main character was totally different from the characters in other games, and he was extremely funny. Ha ha ha. This guy. How did he mistake a girl for a big wild boar? He thinks that she's a demon boar. So hilarious. In the cave that appeared to be covered by ice crystals and ebony jade, Helen watched the conversation between this young man and a girl, and she almost spewed out iced red tea with laughter. Hiss. What's this? At this moment, in Rock Creek Cave, an inhuman voice sounded, summoning storms and thunder with a whisper, reaching heaven and earth and entering the netherworld, changing at will into anything I like. She looked over and saw a faint white shadow appearing before her. It had a body but no feet, looking like a spirit or a ghost with white flames burning around its body. Is it a ghost? She looked shocked. As an aristocrat knight born and raised in Kanglan City, she had never seen such things before. I'm Xuanhuan. I'm guarding this place at my master's order, and I will kill any trespassers. My goodness. Look. What's this thing? Helen's alarming shout drew the eyes of all the people around her. Soon, they saw the white talisman spirit which looked like an immortal. Helen's sword techniques were good, but when she struck her sword at this thing, she found that her blade went through the body of the talisman spirit. This is an alchemy creature? Merlin froze and then yelled, this must be an alchemy creature, a high-level one too. It is a high-level alchemy creature immune to damage. Isn't this a basic mystical realm? How come it has such things? Besides, is this the alchemy of the East continent? Their skills have advanced to such a high level. Chapter 646, 5 Spiritual Immortal Spell. By now, the regular players in the new shop sat together but had made different progress in the game. For example, after traveling around in Green Bird Peak, the elves had just entered Rock Creek Cave. Meanwhile, Helen and the other Golden Griffin Knights who were faster than them had triggered the talisman spirit in Rock Creek Cave. Still not understanding this game, the elves and mages only knew that the dull-looking main character seemed to have a powerful father. There were memories of his parents in Dan's mind, and the players only got a rough understanding of it. Overall, they got the feeling that this young man couldn't meet his parents' expectations for him. In Assassin's Creed, the two main characters were masters at the beginning of the games, but this person was an orphan without any self-defense abilities. Although he was cute in a dull way, it was his life that was on the line. Hearing Helen's scream, everyone around her looked over at the horrifying talisman spirit on her screen, wondering if she would die soon. At this critical moment in the game, Helen was oblivious of her surroundings. Finding that she could move again, she began to run while pulling Handling Shaw with her. Handling Shaw looked puzzled, and she asked, didn't you say that nothing is as scary as your dad? While her face twitched, Helen looked embarrassed and said, girl, please stop talking. I'm protecting you right now. Ouch. Xuanhuan summoned two ordinary talisman spirits to sweep toward them swiftly as a massive white mist with faint spiritual light. Gusts howled and sword energies whistled around them. It was obvious that with their speed, they couldn't come out of Rock Creek Cave alive under Xuanhuan's spiritual spells. They had no choice but to fight. With the inhumane training from Assassin's Creed, Helen used the little strength in her body and controlled Yuntan to stop. At this moment, Yun Tan turned and dodged Qiuzao's attack at the last moment while stabbing his sword into Qiuzao's body. She got it. Many people's eyes brightened when they saw that Qiuzao didn't dodge. The sword pierced into its vital point. If Helen were in Assassin's Creed, this would be a perfect counterattack. However, everyone saw the long sword piercing through Qiuzao's body in the next moment, inflicting no damage to the creature. Meanwhile, Yun Tan felt an excruciating pain all over him as Qiuzao went through his body. Different from the original version, the talisman spirits had no solid forms in the system version, and their ordinary attacks could do damage to the player's souls. I told you. Merlin said while watching the scene. This one is absolutely an alchemy creature, a high-level alchemy creature who is immune to damage and can cast spiritual spells. On the screen, Yun Tan, who was under Helen's control, had been severely injured, and Han Ling Shaw pulled him to flee. Meanwhile, the audience looked toward Merlin and asked, "You know about this creature?" Of course. Merlin was sure of himself. This alchemy creature must be a powerful monster created to guard a tomb or something. Ugh. The mercenaries, knights, and elves looked at the young man curiously. They thought, he isn't old. Is he? Are you an alchemist? Of course. Merlin was touched by the fact that he was recognized. He thought, these elves sure know what is going on. Do you know how to deal with these creatures? Salah and the other young elves asked expectantly. I can if I encounter them. After all, I'm a master alchemist, Merlin said calmly and thought. I'm finally being recognized and valued. I'll see if the damn shop owner dares to treat me as a scammer again. Then Elena pointed at the two people running for their lives on the screen and asked, can you help them? No. Merlin shook his head with absolute certainty. Then, you're useless. Not only Elena, but the elves around Merlin looked at him in disdain. You little girls, don't you have any respect for your seniors and compassion for juniors? With a dark expression, Merlin pointed at the screen and said, in this situation, even a supreme level 9 master can't do anything about it. He just told them the facts. The moment he said it, Han Ling Shaw said in the screen, we'll both die here if we keep this up. We must use whatever method we can think of, regardless of how far-fetched they may seem. Hey, calm down and listen to my incantation. We'll deal with it with an immortal spell. Everyone froze at her words. What is going on? Tao combines heaven, earth, and people to achieve essence. Heaven circulates with essence. Earth moves with essence. Taoist spells sense everything through essences. What's this thing? Everyone was stupefied. Are you two young people who don't know anything? How come you suddenly took out such advanced things? They didn't understand a single sentence, but they felt like the incantation was extremely profound and lofty. Merlin, who had declared that no one could find a solution to this situation, was also stupefied. With his high-level skills in spiritual spells, he could sense the power contained in the mysterious words even though they came from another system which was totally different from his. Smooth water penetrates all holes, burning flames burn all things, fierce lightning shatters all tough materials, sweeping winds travel through all barriers, and nurturing earth merges all things. Ah! The moment Han Ling Shaw finished chanting, Helen yelled, I seemed to have mastered this spiritual spell. What? Merlin yelled in astonishment. How is this possible? Han Ling Shaw had just taught Yun Tan the general guideline of the 5 spiritual immortal spells. All the spells later in the game had to be derived and learned from this general guideline. This was why the players could comprehend all kinds of advanced immortal spells later. The system version of the game gave the players a greater degree of freedom in this area. For example, these spells would be comprehended by players with their own abilities and experience, which meant that different players would obtain different understandings and different things. For example, Helen circulated the spiritual essence in her body with the incantation after screaming. Then, she lightly placed her left palm on the sword blade and yelled in a low voice, lightning spell. A streak of faint lightning energy appeared on the blade the moment she uttered the incantation. The sword in Yun Tan's hand emitted a wave of pale blue light. With the same basic incantation and the same lightning spell, Different people would use it in different ways after they understood it from the Spiritual Spell General Guideline. Chapter 647, Gradually Merging In. Ha ha ha. Check out my new spiritual spell. Looking at the slim lightning energy on her sword, Helen was thrilled. Mr. Fang, who was standing behind her, glanced at it. Recalling the thick blue lightning beams of the lightning spell in the original game, he was speechless when he saw this. However, Helen was thrilled. With a clear yell, she went into battle again. While the lightning bolts flashed on her sword, 3 talisman spirits roared together and swept the air in the cave into howling gusts, which in turn transformed into destructive hurricanes. The sword skills that the players had learned in Assassin's Creed were efficient skills to kill enemies, but the targets were all humans. Since talisman spirits didn't have vital organs, these skills were not enough to deal with them. Helen's fierce attacks afflicted no damage on the talisman spirits. In contrast, Yun-Ten, who was under Helen's control, received many wounds. Still, Helen fought hard and killed 1 talisman spirit, giving the audience a glimpse of hope of turning the tables. Of course, it was only a small hope. This is good, Helen said excitedly. I think I can pass this one if I become more proficient with this spiritual spell. While being cautious, she ducked the attacks and tried to find a chance to fight back. Can we learn spiritual spells this way? Merlin froze. Although the players were placed in a weird world, everything felt real, with a vivid storyline running through the whole game while they were forced to understand and learn spiritual spells under the pressure of life or death situations. In this situation, if you don't win, you'll die. So, the people cultivating in this mystical realm must focus all their attention on the stuff they need to learn and thus achieve a level of learning efficiency at least twice as much compared to the usual situations. At this moment, Helen had totally merged herself with the character in the game. This way, one can obtain more understanding efficiently. More importantly, smooth water penetrates all holes. Burning flames burn all things. Fierce lightning shatters all tough materials. Merlin murmured the words in an awkward accent. This language was stored in Yun-Tan's memory, and it wasn't difficult for this supreme mage to learn a new language. The deep and mysterious general guideline immediately drew his attention. Other than Merlin, the elf Elder Sewell and the Knights of the Golden Griffin Knight Legion had also resumed the game. The mages were all amazed. Are these spiritual spells from the East Continent? Miraculous. On the screen, the second talisman spirit dropped to the ground under the sword attacks engulfed by lightning bolts. However, what happened next went beyond the player's imagination. Violent winds filled the Rock Creek Cave. It seemed that Xuanhuan had just begun using its true power. On the screen, the audience saw that Han Lingshaw and Yun-Tan couldn't even get close to the talisman spirit. So powerful. The gusts instantly sent them flying like cannonballs. The essence and spirit in Yun-Tan's body had almost run out. At this moment, the Wangshu sword in Yun-Tan's hand suddenly lit up. Xuanhuan finally stopped its attacks and bowed while saying, "Wangshu, it's you, Master." Master? The audience, who had thought that the main character was dull and weak, were stupefied. After all the dangers they experienced, the players found out that this powerful alchemy creature was a subordinate of this sword. It turns out that this savage is quite powerful. Elena whispered. It's his father who's powerful. Merlin commented. He must be a very powerful alchemist. Also, this sword must be a very powerful magic item. On this continent, which had different knowledge and cultures, it was natural for the people to use the terms such as alchemist and magic items to describe what they saw. At this point, the players began to have a general idea about this game. I think I get it. This is a story about a great alchemist and his son. Merlin commented solemnly. I can't wait to see if someone is going to teach magical alchemy skills in the game. Mr. Fang put his hand on his forehead. In fact, before Fang Chi traveled through time and space, he had met many foreign friends who didn't know the difference between Uxia and Xianxia. However, this didn't dampen their enthusiasm for the games. Despite their many misunderstandings, These new players enjoyed the game very much. I'm going to fight this powerful alchemy creature now. Elf girl Sala said eagerly, pray for me. Will it submit to me after I show this powerful sword to it? Oh, haha. We can have such a shortcut. Let me try it. In the system version, despite the greater degree of freedom, the players still had to do certain things such as learning spiritual spells. The players couldn't expect Xuanhuan to submit to them the moment that they took out the Wangshu sword. While retaining its high degree of freedom, the system had used all kinds of methods to avoid certain situations. In fact, the players had only one sword, which was Wangshu. From the very beginning, Helen had battled Xuanhuan with Wangshu, but the latter showed no reaction to the sword at that time. This was an issue with the activation and awakening of power in the Wangshu sword. In the original version, the sword woke up the moment Xuanhuan encountered Hanlingshaw, the destined person. However, in the system version, the sword had just been activated once by accident. If the players wanted to activate it again before Xuanhuan, they must know how to use the force of the spells. Right now, Xuanhuan only had one sword at his disposal, which meant that his spiritual spell had to travel into the body of the sword and meet the requirement for activation. So, it was impossible to skip the learning of the spiritual spell. At this moment, Xuanhuan vanished while a yellow talisman paper floated down from the air. Oh, this is miraculous. Elves watched the scene in amazement. They couldn't believe that such a powerful monster actually. It just turned into a piece of paper. This is... Merlin pointed at the talisman paper on the screen and said, this must be a special spiritual spell scroll. Yeah, it must be. Amazing. The players led by the elves exclaimed in surprise. In their eyes, this world was full of natural beauty that paused their steps and also miracles they had never seen before. For them, this was a place full of surprises. Yes, surprises were everywhere. Before they knew it, they merged into the game with their own understanding. Chapter 648, Monsters at Nest Lake, the Sword Immortal emerges. Who are the Sword Immortals this girl keeps talking about? Are they the people who can fly on swords? She seems to be looking for Sword Immortals. She said that the true Sword Immortals can control swords with essence and travel 1,000 kilometers in one breath. They sound powerful. I would like to see such a Sword Immortal too. Sala said excitedly, it would feel great to fly while standing on a sword. It seems that Xuanhuan's parents are Sword Immortals. Yeah. Then, will Xuanhuan become a Sword Immortal too? While playing the game, the elves talked animatedly with the knights and mercenaries. Of course, some people were not interested in this idea. For example, Commander Elven said, our golden griffins are our lifelong battle companions. Flying on swords sounds cool, but the honor of knights doesn't allow us to abandon our battle companions. I think we must check out something else. Haha. Xuanhuan is so silly. I wonder how his father taught him. I'd rather learn some self-defense sword skills to kill wild boars. He's funny. Remembering how Xuanhuan mistook Hanlingshaw as a demon boar, Elena became amused as well. Haha. I think this guy has dealt with demon boars all his life. He knows nothing but wild boars or demon boars. This Lingshaw keeps talking about looking for treasures and legends. Is she a treasure hunter? Some elves asked curiously. It's likely. Hahaha. I like this kid, Xuanhuan. Harrison laughed as well. He is not stupid but very honest. After all, he had to deal with wild beasts to survive from a very young age. The story seemed to drive some of the worries from his mind. The enemies that the assassins would face were too powerful. Without thinking, they were certain that a big trap would wait for them when they go to try to rescue their old peers. Only in such moments could they alleviate a portion of the mountain-like pressure that they were feeling. Let's watch some more before we go and train in the virtual reality mode. Wow! I never knew that a tomb chamber could be so beautiful. The tomb chamber in the Rock Creek Cave was covered in thick ebony ice, and the sparkling lights inside the tomb chamber flew over and gathered around the blazing Wangshu sword in Xuanhuan's hand. So beautiful. To see the beautiful tomb chamber, the elves had hurried into this place too. Obviously, Nothing could stop the steps of the fans of natural beauty. Yun Ten waved his hand casually. Wherever the sword energy went, the ebony ice and walls in the tomb chamber were all cut into two. Then, the earth-shaking booming noises sounded. Ah, the tomb is collapsing. Run, run. The elves ran faster than bunnies. For the players in the old shops, the world of the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 4 was also a new backdrop. They could only find a few traces about such factions in a few scrolls in the Shu Mountain faction. In the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 era, the fall of the Xuanhuan faction was an unexplainable ancient mystery. Now, they were trying to find the answer to the mystery by tracing the footsteps of the people who were ancient even for the characters in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1. How come I feel like this story so far has nothing to do with the Xuanhuan faction? Maybe Yun Ten's parents are related to the Xuanhuan faction. In Sudanji's live streaming room, all kinds of questions flooded her screen. Sudanji chose an option and said, "Do you see that? I can choose to control handling Shaw in the game. If the players weren't in the important parts involving crucial events and the learning of Dharma spells, they could change some of the later plot through their different actions. If the players wanted to get the perfect ending, they could do it by looking at handling Shaw's actions from the perspective of Yun Ten. Likewise, they could choose to play as handling Shaw and see how Yun Ten made his decisions. Of course, since the players would have the memories, habits, and intuitions of these characters in their mind, they could feel what they should do next. I feel like I must go to a place named Nest Lake. While controlling handling Shaw, Sudanji explained, in the Legend of Sword and Fairy game series, there are always wild animals and monsters in the wilderness. I have a feeling that we can't reach it before night. Will we encounter any dangers? Bullet comments shot up on the screen. Song Kingfing said, "It's easy when you encounter danger. Just use the sword control technique." Lin Xiao chimed in, "She doesn't need the sword control technique. With a shot of the Sudanji cannon, she can destroy the whole lake." The Cloud Ocean faction master Yi Song Tao commented, "She can swim in the lake by jumping with the leap of faith. She'll be fine even if she lands on her face." Oh, you guys. Sudanji had the urge to jump up and beat them. I remember every one of you who badmouthed me. Humphrey. In the game, handling Shaw gritted her teeth under Sudanji's control. "Don't let me catch you guys. Don't run after you get offline. These people are infuriating. If I knew a day like this would happen, I wouldn't have live streamed Assassin's Creed that day." It was night in the game. The reeds swayed around in the lake, putting up a bonfire and sleeping on the bank of the river in the high reeds under the moon was quite an enjoyable experience. In the new shop, the scenery-loving elves stood by the lake and watched as the sun set in the west across the lake and moon rose high into the sky from the east. Of course, if Yun Ten wasn't starving and didn't try to draw out male boars by copying the honks of a female boar, the players could continue enjoying the tranquil beauty. Oh, I didn't know that hunting can be done this way. The elves looked interested. After all, they had grown up in the forest, and hunting was their strong suit. While considering trying this trick when they returned, the elves stared at the reeds intently. No, intense murderous spirit. The elves had acute senses, and so did Yun Ten who had grown up in the mountains. His senses were even sharper. In a flash, Yun Ten rolled to one side. A black shadow lunged out from the deep reeds. It was so swift that it brought sharp winds with it. Monsters! Handling Shaw yelled in alarm. Then, the players saw that the attackers were tigers standing on hind legs. Lightning spell. Helen had also come to this place. Bright blue lightning bolts erupted from her sword. Fly feather arrow. Almost instantly, Elf Captain Lars controlled Yun Ten to dodge the attack and then pull the bow to the fullest. Fly feather arrow was an archery skill that Yun Ten created. With his talent and more than a decade of hunting experience in the mountains, Yun Ten obviously was very skillful in archery instead of cultivation. Likewise, These elves were also skillful archers. Elf Captain Lance had even added some of the elf clan's excellent archery skills into his shooting. Wang Xiu's sword shot out like a rainbow. Swoosh. The monster moved like a flash of lightning. Didn't hit the vital point? Lance was startled. These monsters are powerful. Fortunately, Wang Xiu could fly back by itself. After catching Wang Xiu, Elf Captain Lance placed the sword on the bow again, feeling as if he were hunting magic beasts in the forest. Interesting. On the other side, Helen and other knights dashed toward the demon beasts with the sword in hand. Sword energies flew on the screen. We should be fine as long as we kill all these demon beasts. Sutanji also had Wang Xiu in her hand. Obviously, she had switched back from handling Shaw to Yuntan. It was an accident in Assassin's Creed. Okay. Now, I'll show you my real skill. With the strongest, a monster lunged at her with a roar. Sutanji lifted her sword and charged. Ear-piercing grinding noises sounded when the sword connected with the monster's claws. The sharp claws were swept to one side by the blade, and then a streak of blood gushed out. A deep bloody wound appeared in the neck of one monster. How about this counterattack? Sutanji said proudly. Who dares to call me an idle streamer? Awesome. This is interesting. Not as good as Xuanhuan. It's good. It is good enough. After all, Senior is a professional at using swords. No one is his match. Soon, she killed the second monster. Praises instantly flooded the screen. Ha 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 ha. Sutanji was smug when she looked at the couple of monsters lying dead on the ground. I can deal with 40 of such minor monsters. Roar. Roars sounded while about 40 demon beasts charged out from the reeds. Sutanji gaped at the scene in a daze. Exclamation mark. FK. Don't do this to me. I'm doing a live stream. I want to watch how Elder Su deals with about 40 monsters alone. Elder Su's sword skills are unrivaled. Elder Su, I can deal with 40 of such minor monsters. Exclamation mark. Sutanji almost jumped up from her seat. Damn it. Can I live stream properly? In fact, many other players had also come to this part. Handling Shaw had been wounded while they escaped. Yuntan guarded her and didn't have any intention to flee by himself. It seemed like they were doomed. My goodness. What can they do now? How come there are so many monsters? Merlin slapped his hand on his thigh and said, I don't believe that they can escape this time. Suddenly, sword energies flashed in the sky like shooting stars. Look! What are those? Forming a prison with sword array, many flight swords with blazing white spiritual light turned into a sword array in the sky and surrounded the demon beasts. Sword immortals? Salah and other elves instantly exclaimed. Chapter 649, Murong's Eyeing. At this time in the new shop, the elves and some knights, mages, and assassins had come to this part of the game. A few knights of the Golden Griffin Knight Legion and Elder Sul controlled Yuntan or handling Shaw, and they stood under the night sky. Many people stood behind them and watched them play. At this moment, the players looked up and saw dozens of monsters flying into the high sky while roaring. The sword energies full of spiritual essence looked extremely bright in the pitch-black sky. More than 50 sword energies danced and surrounded the demon beasts. The sword energies rotated and then shot across the sky like beautiful shooting stars. The demon beasts howled while the bright white sword energies pierced through their chests. At this moment, another group of sword energies gathered and merged into a huge dazzling sword. Its radiance blinded people who looked at it directly. Subconsciously, the players covered their eyes with their hands. Meanwhile, the huge sword crashed down like a meteorite, exploding with an overwhelming sword spirit which swallowed all the monsters in the blink of an eye. When the light dimmed, the audience saw many monsters falling from the sky, either pierced through by sword energies or shattered by the huge sword energy. None of them survived. At this moment, dozens of sword energies drew beautiful and elegant arcs in the sky like feathers or flowers, coming together to the center. A figure wearing blue and white clothes floated down from the sky like a feather, lightly landing on a flying sword that was emitting a bright light. The other dozens of sword energies danced and flew back into the blue long case behind him. This person waved his sleeve, and nectar fell onto Yun Ten and Han Lingshaw, healing their wounds at a visible speed. Then, this person floated away. Is he a sword immortal? All the players in the game gazed at the sky in a daze. This Commander Elvin couldn't find words to describe his feeling. Ethereal. Helen looked at the illiterate commander in disdain. Right. Commander Elvin said, he reminds me of those existences in the ancient legends and mythologies. So powerful. Not only the knights and mercenaries, but the elves were staring at the scene in a daze as well. Is he a human? Salah glanced at Commander Elvin in Big Sword Crete and then at the figure on the screen. How come I feel like humans and these humans are two different species? Is there a humanoid race named Sword Immortals? Otherwise, which humans can act so elegantly and ethereally? Although they had seen people flying on swords in the previous war, those people were copycats and were not nearly as graceful as this figure who mastered the authentic skill. They say that all the cultivators can do this. Oh, Lingshaw said that they will find sword immortals in Shen State. Does it mean that we can learn this while playing as Yun Tan? If we master this skill, we can also fly around standing on swords in the game. Seeing such an elegant and ethereal skill, the elves were eager to try it. Can we do this too? I want to try flying on swords. Elf girl Salah had stars in her eyes and couldn't wait to try it. I'll try it too. After turning his dazed gaze from the screen, Merlin snapped back to reality and hurried back to his seat. They seem to say that the pattern on the tombstone of Yun Tan's parents looks the same as the pattern on the clothes of those sword immortals, Helen said while she watched the story. I got it. The following story will tell us how he finds out the things about his parents while he learns the sword control technique from these sword immortals. We'll surely get the chance to watch how that miraculous spiritual spell is used. On Helen's screen, Han Lingshaw was considering how they would learn the sword control technique. If your parents had lived in the mountains as hermits for many years, they wouldn't have known these people. But they might be related to this cultivation faction in some ways. On the screen, Han Lingshaw murmured to herself, it seems like I was right. This savage's father must have been a sword immortal. Wonderful. Faction? What's that? Yun Ten looked at Han Lingshaw in bafflement. Helen was also curious, and she wondered, yeah, what is a faction? In frustration, Han Lingshaw explained, I can't bear you. In simple terms, a faction is a group of people who gather together and cultivate. So that is what it is. Helen understood the situation. A faction is like a school of thought and a society in our world. In fact, these new players were as ignorant about this world outside the mountain as Yun Tan, who was a young man born and raised in the mountains. With Yun Tan, they started to understand this world in the game step by step. Yun Tan would ask Han Lingshaw some basic questions that almost everyone should know. For the players in the old shop, they only felt indulgent for his ignorance of the world and even found him cute. But the elves and knights were different. Like Yun Tan, they didn't know the answers to these basic questions either. They traveled from the Green Bird Peak to the Peace Village at the foot of the mountain, and then from Peace Village to Nest Lake to Liu Mansion in Shuyang City. After entering the city, Han Lingshaw said, let's go and find something to eat in a Kezan. Yun Tan replied, Kezan? What's that? Han Lingshaw said, Kezan is a place for people to rest. Oh, it's an inn. The players understood immediately. They stood before a wanted notice. The knights and elves controlled Yun Tan and walked to the poster. Is this Lingshaw? The picture of her looks very lifelike. Some constables walked over and asked, young man, have you seen the girl in the picture? The knights and elves controlled Yun Tan and replied, oh, I have. She just entered the Kezan. They felt happy to have the chance to use this word Kezan so soon. Walking out of the Kezan, Han Lingshaw saw this scene and was at a loss for words. Inside the Liu mansion, Liu Shifeng, the adoptive father of Liu Menglai, said, come on in, nephew, come in. The knights and elves controlled Yun Tan and replied, did you call me nephew? Liu Shifeng said, ha ha ha. Of course, if you want, you can call me Uncle Liu. The knights and elves controlled Yun Tan and replied, Okay, Uncle Liu. Chapter 650, Execution. Mr. Fang's face twitched as he watched from behind. Any problem with that? While playing the game, Helen asked curiously, did I do anything wrong? Following Yan Tan's footsteps, the players began to understand the world from the basics and learned some vague ideas about the things in the world, just like the main character. Oh. 8 hours already passed? Salah stretched her back in comfort. Meanwhile, many others had also finished their 8 hours of playtime today. They sat down on the couches in the lounge area with Sprite or red tea in their hands. Some took the opportunity to buy a mug of cappuccino or a bag of potato chips. A large group of players could be seen in the lounge area. No. At this moment, Helen exclaimed, didn't we agree to try this new game after breakfast and then go back for training? One of the Golden Griffin Knights said to one of his peers with a dark expression, I told you to remind me. Why didn't you remind me? The other knight looked to the other side and asked, didn't I tell you to remind me? Anyway, we trained in the cultivation mystical realm. It counts as training. Commander Elvin found an excuse for themselves. Right. I feel like my sword skills have improved. The knights immediately said while laughing, Sir. Mr. Fang was still playing the game, but he was dragged over by Elf Girl Salah to the lounge area. Can you tell us about it? Elf Girl Salah patted the seat beside her on the couch while asking Mr. Fang to sit down. Salah sat with Elder Sewell next to Mr. Fang, and she said, I still feel like there were many things that I don't understand. So do we. Commander Elvin said, we indeed learned many things, but we got more questions in the process. I'll sit down here. Merlin had realized that this mystical realm was quite unusual. Hearing the people talking about it, he immediately joined in. The players asked many questions about the basics and some questions concerning the complex workings of this world. How about this? Mr. Fang said, I'll write a knowledge post and explain all the things that you don't understand. If you have any more questions, I'll add them in the post later. Although an internet cafe owner wasn't a teacher, it was clearly Mr. Fang's job right now. Awesome. The players' eyes lit up. In the game, Yan Dan could bring his questions to Hanling Shaw. If the players had more questions, they would find answers in Mr. Fang's knowledge post. Everything seemed complete. Sir, will Yan Dan and Hanling Shaw find the sword immortals and learn the sword control technique? What kind of people do you think Yan Dan's parents are? Yan Dan's Wangxiu sword is a powerful alchemy item, right, sir? Do you think? It was balmy in the afternoon, without blazing sunshine or gloomy rain. It was a perfect time for a chat over tea. These people talked among themselves in the lounge area with red iced tea or cappuccino in hands. Right now, the elves, mercenaries, knights, and even assassins had only one identity, fans of the Legend of Sword and Fairy 4. I can't wait to see their alchemy techniques, Great Mage Merlin said. I think the archery and the sword control technique are more interesting. Don't you think so, sir? Elf Captain Lance stuffed a potato chip into his mouth, obviously in a good mood. I think this kid Yan Dan is interesting, Assassin Harrison commented in excitement behind them. Also, that sword immortal looked so dashing. I wonder if we'll see him again. I hope so. Joseph, Ron, and other young people said hopefully. Before they knew it, it was late in the night. While bugs occasionally chirped from the bushes around the flower bed, Kanglan City was as quiet as usual. Moonlight spread over the street before the shop like a silverish white carpet. The last few players reluctantly walked out of the shop in groups of 2 or 3, savoring the progress that they had made today. However, nothing is constant in the world. Every person had their own path. Despite their reluctance, some people had to leave to do certain things. Inside the godly palace of Grey Eagle City, it was late, but lights were still burning brightly inside the palace. I think they're scared. In the palace, Luther listened to the report from the knight standing before him while sneering. As I expected, The real aristocrats in Kanglan City regard the ridiculous assassin mystical realm with contempt, which is why they began to advertise their East Continent mystical realm. However, the lava workshop is useless. The Knight Captain said with a snort. Their so-called interception plan had no effect. That person seems to have a powerful background. He is not someone broken. If we can't destroy his business, I think we'll have a problem, at least here in the Morning Light Empire. Don't worry. Luther poured himself a glass of wine and said calmly, let this guy live a few more days. Our priority right now is to deal with these assassins. His expression turned cold as he said, these lowly rats really think that we can do nothing to them. This time, I'll show them that the reason that we haven't destroyed them is that we don't think garbage deserve our efforts. At this moment, noises came from outside the palace when several assassins were dragged over. These guys are well known among those bugs. Luther gave a signal to the Knight Captain with his eyes, and the latter drew out his huge sword from his back and viciously smashed it onto one assassin's hand. With a soul-wrenching scream, the bones in the slim and nimble hand were instantly shattered and made a series of cracking noises. Okay, it's time to wake up. Damn rat, Luther said coldly, get the scaffolds ready. We've released the news long ago, and I don't think they will sit back and watch. Yes. The Knight Captain immediately put the assassins into prisoner transport vehicles and brought them to the execution grounds.